Dr. Peggy Whitson. Thank you for sitting down with Forbes for the 50 over 50.
Oh, it's my honor to be here. Thank you.
I think it's our honor to speak with you. You have a bevy of superlatives. I'm going to read a few. You have been called America's most experienced astronaut. You have 675 days in space. You are just back from your 4th flight in orbit. You are the first woman to command the International Space Station. And just recently, just this year, you became the first woman to command a private space flight. Did I miss any?
Well, there are a few others, but it's okay.
What do those, I guess to start broad, what do those titles mean to you? What do those superlatives mean to you?
Well, I mean, it's all an honor. It's a part of being a very large team. You don't do space flight as an individual, but it's been a phenomenal experience with the opportunities that NASA gave me, and now with Axiom Space, to be able to continue is even more exciting.
We'll get to what you're doing right now, but just to rewind, you grew up in Iowa, and I understand you were inspired by Apollo 11 and Neil Armstrong's walk on the moon, but also NASA's first commissioning of the first female astronauts in 1978 was a seminal moment to you. Which of those moments proved more inspirational and set you on the path that you are on?
That's a great question, because it was, the inspiration was definitely the guys walking on the moon. But when it became a goal in my mind, as opposed to just a dream, was when they selected the first female astronauts. It made me think, I could do this too. And I was interested in biology and chemistry, and one of the astronauts, female astronauts, Shannon Lucid, was a biochemist, and there were 2 medical doctors, and I was interested in life sciences. And so I thought, this is real. I could do this. Luckily, I had no idea how difficult it might be and how diverse the selection process is. So I applied after I got my PhD. I started applying, and it was 10 years before I was finally selected as an astronaut. And it was funny, you know, looking back now, I can say it was those 10 years that made me qualified to have the experiences and be ready to be selected as the first female commander of the ISS, to be selected as the first female and non-military chief of the astronaut office. All of these things were because of the teamwork, the leadership experiences that I gained during those 10 years of not being selected. At the time, of course, I was disappointed every time I was rejected. And of course, I was like, I need to be an astronaut now. You know, but in retrospect, I can say those were the best 10 years of preparing me.
I think a common question for astronauts is, how did you get there? So what were the steps you took in those 10 years? You get your PhD in biochemistry, and then you have 10 years of rejection, so to speak. But the rejection was learning. What did you learn?
So I was working at NASA already. Immediately after I finished my PhD, I did a postdoctoral fellowship at NASA, and then began working for one of the contractors, and then eventually for NASA, for the government. But it was during those 10 years that I became the lead negotiator in the U.S.-Russian medical operations program, medical sciences program that we were doing together. And I was working in Russia. We didn't have supplies there. We had to come up with processes and procedures of how to do everything, working with a small group of people. And it was just a great experience for me as a leader to learn all these lessons, some good, some bad, but to be successful in the end, and to take away those team leadership experiences that prepared me to be ready later on.
So that first flight to space was 2002?
That's correct. It was a 6-month mission.
So you've never been before, and you go up to space, and you know you're going not just for a few days or a quick little orbit, it's 6 months.
Well, it was planned to be 4, and it got extended to 6.
4 months is still a long time. How do you prepare? You have spent, that was just the first of a few long missions. Your most recent was just 10 days, but what's your longest?
9.5 months.
How do you prepare for something like that?
Well, we do a lot of training, which is great. That's what helps me feel ready and prepared for situations, makes me feel prepared to go. It takes years to do all that training. We train all over the world in the different countries that have different scientific modules on board the space station and learn everybody's systems. And then, of course, I trained in Russia because I launched twice on a Russian vehicle and once on a shuttle, and then this last time on a SpaceX Dragon capsule. So I've had a diversity of different spacecraft to learn about, and it's been a lot of fun and exciting to learn all the nuances and differences between those vehicles. But the training is the part of the process that prepares us for those missions, long-duration missions. In general, you have to be very much adept at doing whatever you're assigned to do, because in a 9.5-month mission, for instance, you don't know what you're going to need to know how to do. So it's a lot of what we call skills-based training, where I know generic skills, I can do maintenance on lots of different things, and then when I'm assigned to a specific task, whether it's maintenance or it's a science experiment, I have the general skills to be successful.
So you go up knowing you need these skills, but you don't quite know the application until you get there, and
Right.
you have to use your ingenuity and innovation
Yeah.
on the spot.
You have to be very adaptable, and I think that's an important aspect of any successful organization, is being adaptable, and you know, as a person, as an individual, I think that adaptability comes in extremely handy.
Is there a story of adaptability, of a moment on the space station that stands out in your mind?
Yeah, there's a few, but one that comes to mind first is when I was a commander of the International Space Station my first time. I'd been up there a month, and a shuttle arrived, and the commander was Pam Melroy. It was the first time we had two female commanders of two different spacecraft in orbit at the same time. But during her short stay, we had a problem with a solar array. As we deployed it, it tore. And it required, we needed to fix it in order, either fix it or jettison it. And these arrays are 115 feet long, and jettisoning it would mean that we wouldn't have enough power to add additional modules that were coming up in the next month or so. And so it was a very high pressure moment, you know, trying to figure out how are we going to fix this. Of course, we had a phenomenal ground team that was helping us figure it all out. But on orbit, then we had to come up with the design solution, which was to make cufflinks out of, you know, several feet long pieces of wire and special clamps and cutting metal and punching holes in the metal. And in space, you have to worry about all the metal shavings and everything because you don't want to get it in your eyes.
Everywhere.
So you had vacuum cleaners out and shaving. And so, you know, hand constructing something, because you can't just go to the, you know, Lowe's or the Home Depot. You have to make it yourself. And so, but I think every step of the way was really pretty innovative, because a young engineer came in and said, how about we just span the tear? Because it was like a 5 or 6 foot long tear. How about we just span it with these cufflinks?
Wow.
And because there were some integral holes in the solar array, and just span it so that as we continue to extend the solar array, it wouldn't tear and make that gap bigger. And
that's incredible.
It was a very simple, elegant, innovative solution to a very difficult problem that would have cost us a lot, you know, potentially the further expansion of the entire International Space Station if we hadn't gotten that array deployed.
As a biochemist and a scientist by training, what do you see as the science that we can do in space in a microgravity setting, as you call it, not entirely anti-gravity? What are you looking to find when you go up there?
Well, I think that I'm a life scientist, so I think my expertise is in that area. I am excited by the potentials offered by developing new medicines and vaccines and other things that can be used as therapies here on the ground. For instance, on my most recent mission, we were looking at cancer cells, breast cancer, colorectal, and epithelial cancer cells, and looking at a particular drug that we would use to try and treat those cancers. And the reason we use zero gravity is the cancers actually grow faster there, so any treatments that we use on drugs have to work very well, otherwise, the cancer growth will overtake them. They also grow more like they do in your human body. On Earth, the cells are flattened by gravity and don't grow like they do in your body when you're testing them. And so this gives us a nice model for testing medical therapies in that particular instance. We also have grown stem cells in space. And these are the cells that you can be used as medical therapies, potentially here on the ground, for various different diseases. But interestingly, we found that the cells grow, some types of stem cells actually grow better in space. And so I think all of these are very exciting. There's, applications of, we grow crystals, protein crystals, that show us the structures of various different, like Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. They've found they've been able to develop drugs because of a better understanding of the molecular structure of different aspects of different diseases. And so it's just exciting that we could develop medical therapies in space. And that's just because I'm more familiar with the life sciences. There's lots of physical experiments that we can be done as well. And I'm looking forward to Axiom Station as a commercial space station actually using microgravity as a tool.
Let's talk a little more about that. I sat down with the CTO of Axiom, and he was talking about retinal implants and how you can develop those on Earth, but they're a little micro, super micro buckling that can happen, and they're still usable. But then he described the process of making these in an anti-gravity or microgravity situation, and then how companies can develop and then sell that technology on the ground. How far away are we from humans using medicine or tools that have been developed on the International Space Station?
I really think we're probably less than 5 years away from actually using them. There's a vaccine that's already in trials for salmonella food poisoning. And it was developed by growing those particular bacteria in space. They are actually more virulent, and then the investigators, meaning they're more hazardous, and then the investigators here on the ground then developed a vaccine using that microorganism that was grown in space. And so there's lots of ways to use these tools of things that we can grow or develop in space.
But just to zoom out, what does the first commercial space station mean to the broader public? And how would you describe Axiom's mission to everyone watching this video?
Well, Axiom's main mission is to expand access to space. And that is for individuals, for governments, for scientists, and in universities, just expanding that access, getting more people opportunities in space, because it is an amazing environment for research or technology development, but also giving people the perspective of where we are in this vast universe, and what does that mean to us as humanity. And so expanding that access has a lot of meanings for our world and our planet. And I'm excited about it as a scientist for all those technical developments that it will enable.
So you had a long career at NASA, and you technically retired from NASA in 2018. At that time, did you think you were done? You were going to sail off in the sunset and relax for a
I
while?
really didn't know if commercial space was going to be developed as quickly as it has. And you know, we hear about all the new satellite companies, the new rockets, the commercial access for cargo and people, and it's exciting. It's a really exciting time. I just didn't know if it would develop fast enough for me to be able to rejoin in this new era of development of commercial space. So I'm really excited about this opportunity.
What made you want to come to Axiom?
Well, they did offer a space flight. But as I mentioned before, I was actually interested in coming to Axiom and working with the scientists in the development of a space station that would optimize for future development of medical therapies and technologies and other capabilities. So it's quite a pleasure to be working with a team like this. We have a lot of experienced folks who worked on the International Space Station and the development of that. And we have all these young, innovative engineers. And it's so fun to watch the interaction. And for me, I am evidently now a graybeard. But I'm able to go in and talk to these young engineers with these new ideas. And it's exciting because, they'll say, how about this? And I'm like, that's a phenomenal idea. You might want to tweak this because it won't work quite as the same as you anticipate here in zero gravity. Or, this one's not going to work in zero gravity unless you change this X or Y or Z. And so it's fun for me to use that experience that I have in space to help these new guys develop an even better space station.
You're taking your 675 days in space and using that knowledge to then fuel the innovation for the first commercial space station.
And it's fun. It's exciting to be a part of that. We're also developing a new spacesuit that will be used for Artemis 3 when NASA's astronauts walk on the surface of the moon. And so that's exciting, too, to be part of developing a new spacesuit, one that fits better, hopefully.
I was going to ask, what's the significance of that? And we've heard about how there was one mission that had to be delayed because the spacesuits didn't fit the women who were going to be on the mission. So does this new suit correct that error?
That's what we're intending to do, is to make it a suit that will be adaptable for all size ranges.
You recently returned from a 10-day mission with Axiom. What does your day-to-day with the company look like when you're not in space? You're the director of human space flight?
Yes.
What does that mean?
So I'm helping develop and modify the training as we learn exactly what we need for our mission. We're modifying training and operations products, and so I can use my expertise to modify the next phase for the next mission, the AX-3 mission, or later missions, but also for our space station. We're doing technology demonstrations while we're on these precursor missions that will enable us to be ready when our station is launched in 2025 or 2026. So.
I think I hear commercial space station and I assume space tourism, but how much of your work is focused on getting regular people up in space versus companies who can develop products like the ones we were talking about?
I mean, we really want to diversify and have it be, everyone as much as possible. On my mission, the AX-2 mission, I had a private astronaut and 2 government astronauts. And I think we will see a mixture of both of those. In the future, I would also anticipate that we would see scientist astronauts that would be going up to develop some technology or test something for future development on board the space station.
You've previously said that through Axiom, you're changing the evolution of the idea that humanity belongs in space. What does that mean?
For me, it means space right now is kind of viewed as an outpost and not a destination. I'd like to see it as a destination. Space is there. We can use it as a tool. Other people might have a station that's for tourism and that they just a hotel, and this one is going to be a space station where we're going to, develop technologies and science and use that tool, but also allow additional access to countries and people to do experiments and work in this environment.
You've also called space your second home, which seems like a remarkable statement given how inhospitable the climate is to life, typically, without innovation.
No.
Why do you call it your second home?
Having spent so many days in space, I think, it's pretty natural to want to call it home. But I really enjoy being there. It's very special to feel that you can adapt to a completely different environment and work there, live there, and have this be normal. I remember the first time I actually thought that. Been in space for about 3 weeks, and I woke up one morning, I'm hanging on the wall in my sleeping bag, and I'm checking the messages the ground team sent up overnight, you know, and I send something to the printer, and I float through the module, and I'm like, I work in space. You know? And it's an amazing sensation to adapt to an environment in a place like that. And I really enjoy it. I'm good at it. I love doing it. And it feels like home.
And you've used your own body as a test subject, is that correct?
Yes, over the years, I've done lots of investigations looking at various different effects on bone, muscle, you know, brain. Everything has been tested in the human body. We test it before flight, during the flight, and then after the flight to see how the changes are impacted. Is it long-term, short-term effects? And so,
what's been your most significant finding, or at least significant to you?
well, I think the part of the reason space is a good tool for doing research on bones is important for Earth, obviously, because people get osteoporosis as they age. And so in orbit, we lose 1% of bone density a month as compared to 1% a year, and what an osteoporotic woman would lose here on Earth. So it's like 12 times the rate that we're losing bone compared to those people. And this is in healthy younger people who just that lack of gravity causes the bones to get weaker. And doing research looking at new drugs to prevent the bone loss and understand the mechanism of why that is happening, using zero gravity as a tool to help us speed up that process can help us understand even more. They found, for instance, even just the vitamin D levels that the FDA had approved were not enough. And so the FDA has increased the vitamin D levels as a result of that NASA research.
Wow.
And so there's lots of little bits and pieces along the way that we've learned just using our own humans as research tools as well.
And you've also talked about how you need to do more exercise when
Yes.
you're up there for a long duration, because otherwise muscles deteriorate. I think you've said 2 hours a
Yeah.
day.
Yeah, so we do what's called resistive exercise because obviously you can't lift weights in zero gravity. So we do resistive exercise, pulling against a resistance, or we do running on a treadmill, but you have to be harnessed down to the treadmill with a certain tension in order, because if you tried to run, you would just bounce off the ceiling. And we use a cycle ergometer, which is pretty similar to what you have on the ground. It's just isolated and kind of floats as you're doing your cycling. So it's a little bit different, but we spend about 2 hours a day on long duration missions doing exercise.
Are there applications for people on Earth from that discovery, do you think, or even for people who are aging?
Yeah, so for aging, I think, and also people who are bedridden, understanding how and why the muscle atrophy is occurring and how to prevent it is really important. Just kind of as an aside research that we found in space.
There's so many avenues of research. I feel like you've also talked about tricks you've played on each other in space. You managed to have some fun up there. Is there a story that stands out?
Absolutely. Well, you know, the kind of the standard trick that you play on the new guy that shows up is to ask them to throw you something. Because in zero gravity, your mind is coming up from Earth. Your mind is putting an arc on it as you throw something. When you throw a ball here on Earth, it's got an arc on it because you have to compensate for gravity in order to get it where you want it to be. In space, everybody will put an arc on it without even thinking about it, and it'll hit the ceiling. So it takes a while to learn that you just pass things, you know, straight at somebody. then when I came back to Earth, I figured out, well, you know, the trick's on me, or the joke's on me, because I tried to throw a tissue in a trash can and it dropped right at my feet. And I'm like, oh, got to put that arc back on there.
It's relearning how to be a human almost.
Yeah, it is.
That's the sillier side, but on a more philosophical level, I've heard astronauts talk about the overview effect, the effect of seeing the Earth in its totality, and how that changes your perspective, or how it can potentially change your perspective. So I wanted to ask you, how has being above the Earth, looking at it as a globe, one piece of the solar system, changed the way you think about the world?
It's really impressive. It's hard to describe, but I'm going to try. Seeing the Earth from above, to me, is most importantly changes your perspective, because you see this whole planet. And, you know, as you grow up, you know, your home is your community, your house, your family, and then it expands as you grow a little bit further. And, you know, then I started traveling and, you know, became the whole United States. And then I started traveling to Russia, and then it became, when I got to the United States, was home. And as you leave the planet, home is Earth, the whole thing. Just because you have this perspective of it from a distance. So that perspective is very important, I think, to my sense of where we are and who we are in this universe. You look out, you see thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of stars, and you realize that's just our little universe, and that our little galaxy, and that there are billions and billions of galaxies out there. And it's this whole sense of perspective. This Earth is so important to us. I like to think of it as spaceship Earth, because you're out in this nothingness, and we have to protect it and take care of it, and maybe we should take care of each other too on spaceship Earth, because there's just so much out there. And that sense of perspective is really important to me.
As you talk about ways perspectives can change from space, I think about some of the conflict we have among humans. And I know space travel has kind of been called the playground for the rich, or private space travel has been called a playground for the rich. But do you think there could be a benefit in really democratizing access and one day getting more regular people up in space?
Oh, I absolutely believe that expanding that access to space is really important. But if you think about, you know, our commercial status now, and back when we were trying to get commercial status on airlines, you know, it started off being just the rich that were involved. And we are trying, you know, we are in that process of, you know, developing something that is going to open up and expand access to more and more people. And so I'm very excited about that goal for Axiom Space to expand access.
When you talk about expanding access, there's also on the astronaut side of things, the engineering, the science careers that can lead to it. What's your grade on how we're doing in getting underrepresented people into space or into these careers?
Well, I think we have to keep trying. As long as we're talking about it, we're not there yet. It's important for us to expand and open up and show people, just like I was shown when I graduated from high school, that women could be a part of space. I think it's important that we have as many people have access to space as possible from all over the globe, so that all the children are dreaming.
You've been on the selection committee for NASA. What have you learned being on that selection committee for people watching and who want to get to that level? What do they need to do?
Yeah, so any field in science, math, engineering, art, all those fields, if you're an expert in them and you're really good at it, you have an opportunity to open up an opportunity in space. But for me, and what I always remind people, young people, you have to not be afraid of failure. You have to try and expand beyond what you think you can do. if you only do what you know you can succeed at, then you're never going to find out what you really can do. And I wanted to be an astronaut, but I never knew I could be, you know, a commander on the ISS. I never knew that I could be the chief astronaut at NASA. And all those things were a part of me doing and taking those opportunities that I wasn't sure I would succeed at. But I learned from them, and I took those teachings to heart and became qualified then to become a better leader the next time I stepped out and challenged myself to do more.
And now, having been the first female commander of a private space flight, how does the private commanding compare to the other types of leadership you've been able to exhibit in this space?
Well, the similarity is, you know, you're still responsible for the health and safety of the crew and the vehicle, and then the overall success of the mission. And so those objectives, as in my role as commander, are all the same. The things that are different are our objectives for, you know, developing a program, a mission for each of the individuals. And at the same time, from my personal goal was to develop a team that was very much integrated and supportive of the team mission as well.
What's next? Is the moon next for you, or Mars, or beyond?
I'm ready to sign up for any of those options.
We're talking for the 50 over 50 innovation list. What innovation do you want to see either from your own scientific work or from Axiom in the next 1, 5, or 10 years?
In the 5 to 10 year time frame, I think we can definitely be developing medical, pharmaceutical therapies using space as a tool to help us get there. I think that's an easy ask. What I really want to see happen, though, is you know, sustainable habitats on the lunar surface, space stations around the moon, and then habitation on the Martian surface as well. And that's probably a few more years out beyond that.
That sounds like science fiction, doesn't it? Habitat on Mars? Or from your perspective, it's totally possible?
It's absolutely possible. And it will take innovation. We've got to come up with new, innovative ways to protect the human body from the radiation, the higher radiation levels. Maybe some of that is just developing faster engines to get us from place to place. But we've also got to build habitats, maybe subterranean, or using the regolith, the soil of the lunar surface or the Martian surface, and actually 3D printing using the regolith to make your habitats and have an expandable, inflatable inside to live from. I think there's lots of innovative ways that we can come up with solutions, and I've heard many young people, innovative folks that have ideas about how we could do these, and I'd love to see all of that happen.
When you were in your 20s and 30s, did you ever imagine your career over 50? And if so, what did you think it would be, and how does the reality compare?
Honestly, in my 20s and 30s, I probably didn't think about being 50. I think that's probably very common. I mean, I didn't fly in space until I was 42. I don't know. I think that it's very special to have had the opportunity to get to space, but the whole path along the way has been so important to me. So when I was young, I don't know that I would have thought of myself as 50 and what would I be doing after 50. At the time I became an astronaut, even at the age of 35, there weren't astronauts that were much over 60. And so, you know, times are changing.
Does going up in space, do you feel the effects on your body differently now than when you were 42?
It's probably a little longer to recover from, you know, it's hard to tell though. From my first mission was only 6 months long, and the longest when I was 57 was 9.5 months. And so it's different duration, but it was longer, harder to recover from that one. I don't know if it's an age thing or
the
a duration thing.
Well, we ask people as part of this package, is being over 50 an advantage or a disadvantage in your line of work? And if so, why?
So for me now, it's absolutely an advantage. I'm using my expertise to help other folks get the most out of their opportunity to be in space, whether that's to develop scientific experiments or to outreach for young people. I'm using that expertise. I'm also using my expertise to help the young engineers who are designing the next space station, Axiom space station. And that's really exciting to me to be a part of that and to be able to use all those hours and days in space as a tool to help other folks step over and bypass some of the hard technology steps.
You're using your technical expertise to advise. When you think about your life experience, what would you tell women in their 20s and 30s who are watching this and feeling like they have to cram in all their professional and personal success before 50, even before 30?
Well, I think it's not necessary, obviously. As much as I wanted to be an astronaut before I was 30, I was a much better astronaut. Getting in later, having more life experience, and learning from all those lessons along the way. That made me a much better astronaut, made me more qualified for more opportunities. And so I would tell people, use every avenue as a learning experience and challenge yourself to live outside what's comfortable so that you really can find out what you're capable of, because it's so much more than you might even dream of.